We have two senior people from the media here, and I am essentially moderating on behalf of the development sector. As Abhishek said, my name is Nitin. The two panelists we have are Mr. Girish NIkam, who is from the Rajya Sabha TV, and Subi, Chaturvedi, who is from the Hill+Knowlton Strategies India Public Policy. I think the format we'll follow, Mr. NIkam, is if you agree, maybe you could briefly introduce yourself and make your initial comments, followed by Subi. And then we would like as many questions coming from the audience. We were planning in any case to have more time for the panel to respond to your questions. So if you agree, sir, can we begin with you, Mr.
Okay. Thank you. I've been a reporter most of my life. I've been a journalist for the last 35 years. And I started my career in a small place called Mysore, deep down in the south of India. And I was a reporter, newspaper, and essentially I've been a print journalist for a long time. And then I've worked in various places of the country, so on, and traveled across the country doing reporting and all. So it's been 30-35 years since I started my career, and it's been a long career. As 35 years back, when I started my career in journalism as a reporter, development was had a different connotation, it had a different meaning. Discussions or such seminars on development wouldn't happen in five-star hotels like it's happening today. We would be in some, So I'm not used to a five-star culture discussing development. And I'm quite confused what the present crop of people who are in the development sector feel is development, because we have very more simple understanding of development now. There is a whole lot of jargon which I don't understand in development, and it's become a very jargonized word, and development is highly jargonized. So I need to understand a lot of these jargons myself before I can say anything about it. But as far as we're talking of media, what I have been able to understand from this brief which I have been given is about the reporter's take on media's role in social sector. Well, in the last 20 years, ever since liberalization, globalization, all this has happened, there has been a change in the way even media approaches issues of social sector. You will find, the pink paper, as they are called, talking all the time about the kind of money which goes into the social sector. The media's approach, the media's understanding of social sector, media's understanding of what should be, how much should the government be involved in these social sectors has changed quite dramatically. And which according to me, an old-fashioned journalist, when it comes to these kind of things, the most classical example of how media understands this is about when it comes to issues of subsidy. Social sector is all about, a lot of social sector is about subsidies. It's about whether it's education, whether it's health, whether it is agriculture, whether it is a whole lot of things where government is supposed to put money into these sectors. But the present discourse is all about how much the government should get out of these sectors and allow the private sector to come in. So there is this huge debate going on in this country all the time about whether the government should continue to subsidize these sectors at all, and why not allow the private sector to come in, whereas on the other hand, these two striking figures which we inevitably get every year when the budget comes out is about what has been the amount of subsidies given to social sector and what has been the taxes which have been foregone for the corporate sector. These are two great numbers which we need to understand. And the present development sector in its corporatized form, I see a lot of corporatization of the development sector also nowadays. So I don't understand their jargon because of that. But the fact is that in the last budget, which was presented a couple of months back and will be discussed in the Parliament soon in the next week, 6,11,000 crores, 6.11 lakh crores, 6.11 lakh crores. I don't know how many zeros you will get in that. 6.11 lakh crores was the taxes foregone for the corporate sector. 6.7. The last year it was 5.76 lakh crores. So which means that about 35,000 crores more taxes were foregone for the corporate sector taxes. So when you look at the subsidies for the social sector, it is less than half of that amount. So there is a big, huge hue and cry made about subsidies made to the social sector, but hardly any newspaper or media takes up the other number which I spoke about. It was very interesting this time when the budget came out. I was looking at the budget papers. Looking at a budget paper is itself a skill which one needs to develop over a period of time, because it's a huge document and you will have to find the right numbers in the right. It takes for a period of time. I've to some extent learned how to read the budget paper. So I was one of the first persons to get this figure out this year on the day of the budget. So I won't tell you the name of the MP, but I passed on this message to an MP, an opposition MP actually. I said, do you know this? Do you know what is the number this year? This is the figure. He said, where did you get this? And he's one of the better MPs that we have in this country, I can tell you. And he said, where did you get this number? I said, it is there in such and such a page. Please have a look. And then, of course, he used it and put it up. But nobody in the media that day or the next day, I was looking, nobody published that number. Nobody published a story about that aspect of, in the budget, which is very, very crucial. 6.11 lakh crores. A whole lot of things can be done. A whole lot of things can be done in the social sector. Education, health, a lot of the budgets which are there, it encompasses all that. But we don't discuss that anymore because it is not part of the agenda. The agenda is something else. So are we in the media, should we also follow that line, which we are doing? Unfortunately, what's happened is majority of the media follow that line. The fact that nobody took up, I put it on my Facebook, this number, tweeted, some people, maybe 100 people, maybe 150 people liked, about a dozen or 2 dozen shared, and that was it. Nothing else happened from that. There is no discussion, debate in this country on these figures. But farmers' loans were waived in 2010, 2008, 72,000 crores. People might have said, what is that? Why are we spending this kind of money? The kind of discourse will change, and they'll say that you're giving farmers, you're creating a bad habit among farmers. This is the discourse. This is the argument that you're creating a bad habit among farmers. You're not allowing them to work. You're giving them free money. But what about all this free money which you give to the corporates? So there is a skewed kind of debate and discussion and discourse happening in this country when it comes to development. So, and the media has become part of that. How do you people, if you people are really sincere in your own area of work, as far as development is concerned, in all this, in the social sector, then how are you going to ensure that there is a proper discourse and debate in this country on issues which actually needs to be discussed, and not on issues which are actually not the concern of majority of the people in this country? How are you going to ensure that this happens? How are you going to get the media to discuss all this? How are you going to deal with this kind of a media? How are you going to make the media feel guilty about what it is doing and ensure that it takes up issues which are actually the problem of the majority of the people of this country? This is a challenge for the development sector, according to me. Media is posing a challenge to you people now by its own agendas, driven by corporate sector. The majority of the media has now been taken over by the corporate sector. So but still there are honorable exceptions, whether it's in the print media or television, and now there's a very new exciting thing happening on the internet. Some new websites are coming up, purely news and views websites are coming up. Whether they will be able to sustain and survive, we don't know. But if those kind of sites are able to sustain, then there is some hope for the development sector also, because as this country becomes more and more digitalized, it's not just in English, it has to be in all the Indian languages. As it becomes digitalized, that is where you people in the development sector needs to focus on. Because if you have to get your point across, if you have to get your agendas across, it has to be in the Indian language, in the Indian languages. And maybe if these experiments on the digital media becomes a success, you have some space there where maybe the corporate media, the corporate controlled media will have no control over. That is one of the hopes which we have now. But the mainstream media in this country has become completely corporatized, corporate controlled. So, it's very difficult to get across certain messages which are actually the concerns of the real people of this country. How are you going to do it? That is the challenge before the development sector. And I will leave it at this, and whatever, I will take questions later. But I think I will leave it at this for you to think.
Thank you, Mr. NIkam, for quite an good overarching view of the relationship between media and development, especially in the current context, and also I would think voicing questions that many of us do have in our minds vis-a-vis this. I'm sure the audience will get back to you with their questions or comments once we open the floor. Subi?
Sure.
Yeah, please.
So, Nikhil, Abhishek, thank you so very much for having me here. My name is Subi Chaturvedi. I've been an activist, academician most of my life. I've taught journalism, communication for development in rural journalism at one of the better prestigious liberal arts colleges in Delhi University. I also run a portal that's called the saltlist.org, which brings together young women students from across the country, and they write on alternative issues. And it's called the Salt List, which means satire in the age of letters and technology. So my work expands through development, communication, new media. I also write for the Hindu and the Express, and I add to the noise at the news hour in the evening, English and Hindi. And I'm also the first Indian to advise the United Nations Secretary General on global internet governance issues. I'm truly delighted and actually quite honored to be amongst friends, and especially Girish, who in all his humility did not tell you the most important thing that journalists are doing today. We're in a very difficult time and age. So India is one of the better countries where freedom of speech is still not so much under threat, but globally, everywhere, whether it's Turkey, whether the so-called democratic countries, there's been an increasing tendency for state control. So the more important thing that he's done is he's reported on elections, the political processes of the country, and he anchors a very, very powerful and important discussion show on Rajya television that still continues to speak truth to power, where dissent is at the heart of every democracy. What is it that we're doing here today? I've divided my intervention in about 3 stages, and I'm trying to first discuss why development and what is the role that media plays and why is it that it's important to have an intervention. Second, to be fair to our friends in the media, they're now dealing with 27 news. So what is it that people from the development sector can do to make their lives easy? And how is it that news gets onto print? All of us, when we look at newspapers, we know for a fact that there's very little space for development-oriented news. There's news of all sides, all kinds. We're fighting for space. And if it's a picture with news in column centimeter squares, that's even rarer because that means more cost to the organization. You'll have to send a photojournalist across to the venue. So how do you reach out, and what is it that makes for news? How does it get there? I want to start my intervention with a small quote by the father of development communication, and his name is Wilbur Schramm. He's been critiqued to death, but what he says is very important. You know, by making one part of a country aware of other parts, their people, arts, customs and politics, by permitting the national leaders to talk to the people and people to the leaders and then to each other, by making possible a nationwide dialogue on national policy, by keeping the national goals and national accomplishments always before the public, thus modern communication, widely used, can help weave together isolated communities, disparate subcultures, self-centered individuals and groups and separate developments into a truly national development. That, in short, is what the role media and communication can play. So there are 3 things that journalism can do and has the power to do. They're the eyes and the ears of the readers, people who are not present at a distant location, who do not know what is happening, people who do not have the time and the capacity to engage with complex documents like the budget that Girish just talked about. There's a whole Ministry of Statistics, by the way. They'll pay you a lot of money if you're going to volunteer to do research and humanize statistics, okay? So we clearly agree that it's a complex task. So to make things simple for people to consume and understand, which means no verbal diarrhea, no complex academic interpretations of what the government has just done, but to speak to the common layman from a perspective which simplifies policy. And that says, agar sarkar 100 rupiya kharch kare, to uske 4 rupaye kahan ja rahe? So that's a popular statement by MKSS, and it's a credo that we live by. Ye sarkar nahi kisi ke baap ki, ye hamari aap ki. The other one that they talk about is even better. It says, aapka paisa or aapka hisab. So that's what journalism does. It tells you what is going on, where is it happening, how is it happening. It's supposed to speak truth to power, which means that development-led journalism or stories that have used the right to information or have done original research or investigation can actually hold the government and different departments of the government accountable. What that also does is it creates a stable policy environment for investment. So take it from me, Make in India nahi hone wala hai. Because you have retrospective policies, they're not stable, they're schizophrenic at best, and depending on the day of the week, whoever the bureaucrat in the room is, you'll have a different interpretation of the policy. Okay, so without a conducive ecosystem, you will not get FDIs to come in because we do not know what's going to happen to them. The second part, and a very important part, I am a child of the internet, I'm an internet social media junkie, I live on the internet. But the current internet penetration in India is at a mere 17%, okay, which means vast majority of India is unconnected. You have merely 340 million people who are in online, okay, from India. Internet has been reasonably gender balanced, so equal number of men and roughly equal number of women. The global figures are 3.5 billion, okay, out of 7.2 billion. Roughly half the number of population of this world is online. Again, enough gender diversity and balance there. But the challenge is that in terms of the unconnected, India is one of the highest in unconnected. We also have a very, very high growth rate. So by the time I got up from my chair and I walked and got to the podium, 15,000 new people have come online in India alone. That is the speed at which we're bringing people online. 940 million mobile phones, and that is an instrument of communication. You know, at this point, I want to invoke a fantastic experiment that has been done by a former IITian and a former journalist. It's called CGNet Swara. I don't know how many of you have heard of it, but you can Google, look for it online. In Gond and in Konkani and in their local language in Chhattisgarh, you can call it. Your phone will get disconnected. You will get a call back from this agency, which is called CGNet Swara. And then you can record your problem, whether it's a bad road, whether it's missing teachers in schools, and this organization will then translate it and file a story, which is then picked up by news organizations because they believe that sitting in South Delhi or South Mumbai, it's a cost to get to a tribal area. Many of these stories have resulted in change in policies. Missing teachers have magically turned up in distant tribal schools, and they have seen roads getting built up because this story was picked up. So there are alternative platforms of communication which are bringing about a change. The third thing that every journalist and every media organization owes to the public, okay, the masses and the readers, the figures which they quote at the end of the year to get more advertising money, is the fact that you must bring in diversity and plurality of views. We're multicultural, we're multi-ethnic. But if you were to switch on to 9 o'clock news, and God help you then, you will see the sameness of panelists. So I have had friends who are panelists who sit in one room and they have 3 different news channel cameras. When they face to the left, they're on one channel. When they're on the right, center, they're on another channel. When they've turned this way, they're on a third channel. So if you were to remove the logos, you will have and I will not name that person, commenting on economics, on politics, on social theory, on what the government is doing wrong in foreign policy. So the trouble is that most news channels claim a high distribution cost of carriage as where our revenues are going, and therefore we do not have the money to pay for original research and content. And the fact is, as Girish pointed out rightly, and I've written a paper in the Economic and Political Weekly where an independent media trust, which is Reliance TV18, acquires a news channel, and therefore by rule, the hand that feeds you, you do not bite that hand. When the boardroom starts controlling the newsroom, agendas get coalesced, okay? So you will not see many stories that can hurt economic interest of the parent industrial organization being reported in the media. That's corporatization of news for you. Fox News is not to blame as much, but what is dangerous in India is a lot of large corporates who have interest across sectors, which is coal, which is water, which is power, now also own most of your large news agencies. So whether it's print or electronic or even regional and vernacular press, which is where a lot of good stories are coming out of. That is the scary part. So where we do not have a regulatory agency like an FCC or an Ofcom, our press council in India is more like a paperless tiger which tells you, oh, please don't do this. But that is not effective. You don't hurt organization where it hurts, so there are no punitive measures. Now, that has been our challenge as far as development communication is concerned. So a certain prominent leading newspaper owner can say, my readers live in South Mumbai and therefore they have no interest in reading what goes on in Vidarbha, because my advertisers are not interested in reaching out to farmers in Vidarbha for a 10,000 rupee sneaker. Okay, so therefore it doesn't make sense for me to report those kind of stories. So what happens to our concept of journalism being the fourth pillar, journalism being the fifth estate, journalism questioning, and the rights to question is what journalism really gives to you. So on the other side of the table, when I say what are the challenges, there are three things that journalism does. It provides you information. It also sets the agenda for discussion and policy. It tells the government what is it that you need to be focusing on and what is it that you're doing wrong by way of policy. And therefore, private sector will get hurt, citizens will get angry, and you will lose the next election. And the third thing that journalism does is it creates a platform for dialogue. And that's where the challenges have been. Has there been enough original independent investigation, and what are the kind of stories that you are seeing which focus on these three things? So one is the social aspect, where you look at subsidies, you look at distribution, you look at where is it the government spending money. Has our defense spending gone up in the last 3 years? Has our education budget shrunk? Has our public health and sector investment gone up or decreased? So those are the questions that a good journalist will ask the government. And we have seen across the world, wherever there's free and independent press, corruption has come down. Because you're going to ask more questions, you're going to hold public institutions accountable. So the thumb rule is all journalism needs to be for public good and in public interest. But that's sadly not the reality today. So with a country which has the most number of news channels, about 460 daily news channels, with another 300 in the pipeline waiting clearance. Okay, so newspapers run into lakhs. We're the only country in the world where bucking the trend and we're increasing newspapers. Everywhere the number of newspapers is shrinking. And many other websites, portals and radio stations. So FM sadly now still does not have the power to broadcast news, but our RJs are creative and they figure out a way of broadcasting news. So the question that we ask today is, how do we get journalists? Good journalists do not need much prodding. So Girish will go for a story wherever the story is. But journalists who are Google or Wikipedia based journalists, let's say not that committed or have other greater priorities and challenges, how do you reach them? You make life easy for them. When you write on nutrition, when you write on malnutrition, sustainability, you make sure that you remove the jargon and you also humanize the statistics, and you send out press releases which are informative but are shorter, crisper. You also engage with the journalists and you educate them. You do a lot of research because you have to sell those stories harder. These stories are not sexy stories, so you make the effort to sell them harder. You structure them in a manner so that the journalist's job becomes easier. That's not the ideal situation, but that's one way of getting through to them. And the second thing, what we have access to now is the web. So your blogs are going viral, you're tweeting at positions of power, and internet is distinctive. So what the newspaper didn't give you was an opportunity to express or question. You had a letters to the editor, which is limited space, happens once a week. Now with the internet, you're tweeting directly at people, you're posting their YouTube videos with election promises. So things are much better. But the question still that need to be asked is, should there be regulation in ownership? You should never regulate the media, but in terms of vertical integration, in terms of linear, should there be regulation in terms of how many companies can own content as well as distribution? Those are the questions that have already now started being posed in UK as well as in parts of Europe. Those are the kind of debates that we need to have here in the country, that should a company which commissions a script, then has a TV production company, makes a serial out of it, has a film school, gets actors to act in it, has a radio studio, plays the songs from that film, and has a magazine and a news channel. Should they be allowed to create an ecosystem which is independent and controls profits? So forward, vertical and horizontal integration is worrisome. And the constant thing that we as citizens, because from slaves to citizens, it's been a very, very long fought, hard battle. Our rights to question, both in terms of accountability of the government and use the media, where, calling media names is not helpful. Working with them and getting the story across and explaining your facts is something that all of us can do because they're accessible. We know where to find them. So that's one journey, and that's one park point that I'll leave my interventions at. Feel free, observations, questions, comments. Happy to hear more from the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Subi, for a rather frank exposition on the situation at hand. And so now that both Girish and Subi have made their comments, I invite all of you with your comments, observations, questions. I request you to introduce yourself briefly and keep your comments or questions as brief as possible. Please.
My name is Harish. I work with Seven Sites. It's a research organization. And the deliberations were really insightful and very thought-provoking also. From the panelists, I wanted to understand two things. Media is very powerful, as Subi just pointed out, but still the news or the issues that are of concern to the social development sector, the space that it takes in the mainstream media is so thin. Even if it takes in some of these, let's say into the newspapers, I follow 2 or 3 newspapers. The same news presented in different colors. I don't know if I should call it biased, but then I mean that's not news. That gives me an impression or the opinion of the political editor or the reporter that's writing. So I think what is the way the media can actually act as the 4th pillar and present the news rather than their views and opinions. 2, what is your opinion on the social media becoming so crude these days? For example, on I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn. I have my networks which is pro one political party, pro another political party, pro the government, anti-government, pro one region, anti another region. I mean, it's so many crabs, and whether they're original or not, or fabricated or what, I mean, we would like to have your views on that. Yes, I mean, please tell us what is your take on the confusion that the social media is creating on different issues. I'm not going to mention any specific issue.
Sorry, what was your name again?
Harish.
Harish, thank you for the question. I'll take social media first. And so what journalism does, mainstream, is it has editorial control, which means that there is someone who spends certain number of years in a newspaper or a magazine, and they decide what finally goes into print, which means that objectivity, truth, fairness, these are tenets of journalism that should have been applied. There's also something called balance, where if you're laying a huge accusation on someone else, you needed to get the other side of the story in. At least attempt should have been made to get a response. That's theory. That is what I've taught my students at LSR. But what you see is clearly in a lot of publications a slant. Journalists are also people, and there's nothing called unbiased, objective reporting. So it's a summation of experience and conditioning that will go into an article. But there should be an attempt at being reasonable, at being fair, from a plain, simple, common sense perspective. So just as you can criticize the judgment, but attacking it or making it personal is unacceptable. So there has to be rationale in terms of perspective. What's happened on social media, for good or for bad, is it's technology that's in its early phase. And it anonymizes people, so you can have troll123 @Twitter telling whatever they want to. And if I don't like my neighbor's face, or if I want to settle my parking disputes, I can take to Twitter, troll the person, I can go to Facebook, I can rant. And there's no editorial control. So the challenge is, if you ask for editorial control or if you ask for any form of censorship, it's a very slippery road. That's when the government comes into your bedroom and they tell you what you can post, what you can write. What happened with Section 66A and the Palghar girls, with Mr. Kapil Sibal trying to control, and an Internet IT Act which was premature, was not debated in the Parliament. So there are two challenges. One is legal. Judiciary is about, if I'm conservative, then about 5 years behind as to what Facebook, Twitter, and I've spent time at Hyderabad at the Judicial Academy speaking with learned judges, all well-intentioned, well-meaning people, but they simply haven't experienced social media. So one is from the legal standpoint, are we prepared, are we ready? And the second is society as a whole. It's an opportunity of expression. So the kind of language that you would hear people use, the difference between slander and defamation, that I let myself get away and I said whatever I wanted to because there'd be no accountability. And third, when it's trending, it usually means above 4,000 people have written or spoken about something. It's the mob that believes they have unaccounted enormous amount of power and no one's going to take them to task. So in terms of language, YouTube, a regular YouTube video with a Jagjit Singh ghazal can have the most bizarre, obnoxious commentary right underneath. You're a Paki, go to Pakistan. So in terms of regulation and control, as community standards go, can YouTube stop it? No, they can't. They encourage community control where you tell people to say this is unacceptable, or we're going to unfriend you if you continue in this language. I think Girish would have also been at the receiving end of some of this. So the fact is, you don't want to agree. Social media likes echo chambers. Social media likes people who agree with you. So can the government control it? No, they can't. The first thing they did was, after the Muzaffarnagar riots and the Northeast exodus, is call for a chief ministerial meeting with about 25 of them coming up in a room and saying, isko band karao. But you can't do that. What you have to do is you need to learn to engage on social media. The Muzaffarnagar riots is a classic example where they said it's a 3-year-old YouTube video which caused the riots. If you looked at internet penetration, it was not even circulating. People do not have phones where they can watch videos. So the government took 3 days in responding to that one video, and Meerut cantonment was right next door. All you had to do was, and that should be your last resort, but the administration failed us. It's not social media which is causing riots, but people will have to exercise restraint, and that's what we say for the media as well, that they need to exercise self-regulation, and they owe it to us. They're not in the business of selling souls. So, the privileges that they claim and the choices that they have made to be in a very, very difficult profession is something that needs to be borne in mind. And as far as thinning space, I mean, there'll be economic rationale, and I'd let Girish speak to that.
Well, first, let me tell you about what's happening in the media as far as social issues, which I deeply touched when I spoke earlier. Newspapers, by and large, magazine and television channels, by and large, think, for whatever reasons, that social sector issues are not of interest to normal readers of newspaper and viewers of television. That is a judgment. That is the editorial judgment of people, which is a very sad thing. But there is also some kind of a justification if you look at it from their point of view, from the editor's point of view, from the owner's point of view, whoever is deciding these things. Because how many of you read edit page articles on issues of development? How many of you read? Maybe 10%. I'm being very I'm being very general actually. 10%. The problem is the people are also not interested. A few of us who are interested will go on talking about it, because I have seen this happening all the time. I do this all the time. I keep checking this all the time. I'm on the Facebook. She said she's an internet junkie. I live on the Facebook. I was in a similar seminar sometime back and there was this lady who was talking about social media and said that the normal time a person should spend on social media every day is about 1 hour. I spend 12 hours. I spend all my waking time. It's always on. So anyway, and what I keep doing there on Facebook mainly. I'm not so much Twitter person. I don't like the 140 character. I'm a long form journalist. I've been a print journalist, or I can't write in 140 characters. So anyway, whenever I post interesting stories, articles which have appeared in various newspapers, magazines, whatever, concerning social sector, very, very interesting stuff, very, very disturbing stuff. The kind of response I get is, very poor. For a period of 2 days, I'll find some 20 likes, 25 likes, maybe half a dozen people have shared it. I posted something yesterday on Shaktiman. Shaktiman died. It's trending almost. Everybody is talking about it, everybody is sharing. I'm not saying that Shaktiman is not a thing which should not be shared, but I'm telling you the kind of, I put a photograph yesterday of Modi and his black statue. It's just going berserk. People are going berserk. These are all things which they don't need to use their mind. They just have to share. But when there is anything which is above 200 words, people don't read. It's a huge problem. This is a problem of the present generation. Most of you sitting here are in your 20s and 30s. You don't read. So how do we as journalists, and being a devil's advocate at this point in time, how do I as a journalist and editor give importance to an issue where people don't show interest to it, where the interest is only 10% or even not even 10%. So the blame lies among the people, the readers, the viewers. How many of you will sit and watch a program on television which is showing something in Latur about what is happening with the actual reason behind the water scarcity in Latur? I'm sure some very good programs have been done in the last 1 week, 10 days. How many of you have seen it? You don't watch it. You don't have the patience to watch it. After 2 minutes, you will what do you call it? The attention span is so limited. You have your remote in your hand and you keep changing your channel. You don't watch it. So it's such a, I know people who have, in Rajya TV, we do some excellent programs. We do programs which nobody else does. We spend a lot of money on reporting, which no other channel I can challenge spends as much money as we do on people traveling to various parts of the country, remote parts of the country. Go and report first hand. Come back with half an hour specials almost every week on various issues which are real issues concerning the real people across the country. But we hardly get people who are watching them. And it is there on the YouTube. All of them, all these programs on YouTube. I keep checking them. How many, the views, are they increasing dramatically? They don't increase dramatically. They increase very incrementally over a period of time. So, people are not watching. What do you do? Still, we spend a hell of a lot of money. We have just started a program at Rajya TV only aimed at tribal groups. And we have already had 3 episodes. One of the episodes was in Andaman Islands. Which television channel has sent its reporters and teams to Andaman Islands in the recent past? Can any of you remember? We are the only ones who sent. We've done a great program there. But the kind of response which we are getting is very, very, very poor, and it's very easy. So the problem is also the people, the viewers. Okay. So that's one aspect of the problem which I think people also need to take note of. As far as social media is concerned, social media is a mad place. It's also a very exciting place, but it's an excitingly mad place. I'm, as I said, I'm a complete junkie, and I use social media. I get abused because of that, which is okay. I get abused all the time, which is all right. The other day I just put up just for some amusement for all of you. I just put yesterday in the morning I put up a post. This was an old story on one of the sites on the net, which actually showed how Narendra Modi had withdrawn what his educational qualification was after this Aam Aadmi Party minister was arrested. First caught, he had given them fake, no, not so much. Another one were given fake qualification and he was arrested by the police. Immediately after that, this was in 2015 June or something.
Yeah, they went to
immediately after that, Narendra Modi's education qualification disappeared from the PMO website. And somebody had done a story on that, and that story somehow got to my attention, and I posted. I said, "This is a damn interesting story. The Prime Minister withdrawing his educational qualification after this happened." And then there was a spate of, as you can imagine, in this divisive era, divisive age, some people started abusing, people started appreciating, sharing, all this stuff. And then yesterday, and then towards the night, I realized, a lot of abuse. And you know how it is. It is who are called bhakts, the devotees and bhakts or whatever they call, whatever we call them. We are being cruel actually, but it's on par with what we get. So I said, I had to make a compilation of what I said. What is why should a Prime Minister withdraw his education? Aren't we as citizens entitled to know what is the education qualification of our Prime Minister? That is all the question is. Nothing else. So the responses to it was very interesting. I just compiled it because I thought it was so interesting. I sat in the night and since I have hurt my face very badly, I am not doing my shows, I am on leave. So I have a lot of time in my hand to do all this. So the responses were like this. First one said, Pappu Bhakt. Pappu Bhakt. You know what Pappu Bhakt is? I'm supposed to be Pappu Bhakt. First explain the entire Khandan's credentials before question. Now, question was, why can't the Prime Minister tell us what is educational qualification? So the immediate response is, you are a Pappu Bhakt. Why can't you ask the entire Khandan's credentials before questioning? I can't ask the question to our present Prime Minister. I'll have to go back to the Nehru and Indira Gandhi and all that. The next response was, is really a degree required now? Or can see what he is giving? Can't you see what he is giving us? Why is a degree necessary? Another person said, the difference between Bharatiya Janata Party and Congress is that after commenting this post online, you are still in your job. They are telling me actually that you are still holding your job in Rajya TV. This government is being so generous and allowing you to retain your job. Another person said, being a journalist, you should introspect. Why this heavy bias on one side and heavy myopic view on the other? Another said, but you never raise those issues. Even if anyone searches with the electron microscope in a FB posting, one cannot find. This person regularly gets it back from me. But yesterday I just let him go. Then the same person said, if you want to know, file RTI like Subramanian Swamy. Oh, again Subramanian Swamy is the standard. So somebody actually interviewed and said that actually I have filed an RTI. I didn't get the response. And he posted the RTI reply which he got from the PMO, which said that, we can't give you the details, please go to PMO website. So now it's a shame, but when the same thing was by predecessors, it was just part of the picture. And then somebody said, what's your problem? Why are you asking these questions? So anyway, what I'm saying is that this has become a very divisive event. The last 2 years has become, whether we like it or not, last 2 years has become politically a very divided country. We are in a, unfortunately what is happening is even the development sector has got involved in, has got entangled in this divisive atmosphere. So you say something, immediately they'll say, oh, why didn't you ask this question 5 years back? Or why didn't you ask this question 2 years back? So these things have become pretty bad. I don't know when it will end, where it will end, how it will end. But there is a time when social media also needs to be used. These are all, we can keep these aside, these kind of things which happens on the social media, the kind of people who are illogical, irrational, you just have to ignore them. But social media is a very powerful tool, and that powerful tool needs to be used by the development sector. As Subi was rightly pointing out, people's attention span is limited. So you need to tell them. And please remember, even the journalist's attention span is more limited. To get the journalist to get excited with your story, with whatever work you're doing, you need to be skilled enough to let him know in a few paragraphs, probably, or a few sentences, or maybe in a what do you call that, a graphic or whatever, what you are doing, get his attention first. And social media can do that very well, because most of the journalists are nowadays on social media. They're looking for stories on social media also. So how you sell that on the, this is a skill which I'm sure for a period of time all you guys will be improving your skill also. How to use this media to ensure that your message gets across as widely and as more as possible.
Thank you. I think that was a very detailed response. We take the question from the gentleman there. Is there a mic? Please introduce yourself briefly.
My name is Harish. I work with an organization called Transform Rural India. And this question is actually just a comment and then some clarification from Girish. Actually, I was also talking to a senior editor in one of the pink papers, and they also came up with the same thing. They told me that we sell products. And, we sell products, and there is no market for it. And he said, you look at the popular culture. In 1950s, you had movies called Mother India, Dubika Jamin. Now all your movies get made in UK and Switzerland. Yeah. So there has been a surge. But there was a counter narrative also. That even at that point of time in 50s, there was a South Mumbai and there was a Gujarat. So in the context of with your long experience before liberalization and after liberalization, has the narrative of the country changed? Or it is the way of putting up things which needs to be modified? If the narrative has changed, then one has to think that the whole we are fighting a losing battle.
Excellent question. Very good.
And if not, then what can we do?
Okay. Yeah, I guess I need to take this question because I've been a journalist pre-liberalization era and post-liberalization era. I've seen both eras. When I started as a journalist, you guys wouldn't have seen the kind of things which we, firstly, I wrote by hand. I wrote all my reports by hand when I started my career as a journalist, on a paper, which was known as a newsprint. I used to work in a small newspaper in Mysore called Star of Mysore. So we all had to handwrite our stories, and then it had to be it was something called a letter press. I don't think you people have seen. Maybe there should be I'm sure there's a museum somewhere where all these.
It's like playing Scrabble, and every letter.
Somebody has to look at what I have written in my own dirty handwriting. My handwriting is horrible. And in the place where I worked, there were these were called typesetters. They were called typesetters. That job doesn't exist anymore. That profession doesn't exist anymore. So, I have come from that age. And then if I travelled outside the place where I used to work, and if I had to transmit my story, there was no STD in those days. There was no STD. Now you don't even talk of STD. There was no. You had to book a trunk call, and the trunk call had to be booked, and it would take 2-3 hours for you to get a connection from, say, if I am in Delhi, and if I was in Faridabad, and if I had to call Delhi, I would have had to, a trunk call had to be booked, and trunk call would take 2-3 hours, and we had to wait near the phone in a telegraph office, and then we would get the phone call, and then we would dictate our stories to our office, and they would take it down. That was the kind of situation, and now everything is possible on this.
The lightning call was about 30 minutes.
Lightning call would take 30 minutes, which was 4 times the cost. The cost was 4 times more. Very few people could afford to make a lightning call. So that was the kind of situation from which I started my career, and dramatic changes have taken place in this world. So has the narrative changed? I'm sure it has changed. I'm sure the way people look at things have changed. I remember when bottled water came, first entered the market. Nobody thought people can afford to buy a bottled water, and how can anybody pay 5 rupees or 10 rupees to buy water? Why should anybody pay 5 rupees to buy water? This was the argument. Now I can't imagine. Look at the number of bottles here, and look at the amount of wastage we do in this. This narrative has changed. People have changed. People's outlook towards things have changed. I went to my, I have my maid. My maid has 3 mobile phones in her house, which was unimaginable even 15 years back. 10 years back, when I got my first mobile phone in 2002, it was available from 1998 or 97, 98. One call on a mobile phone costed 16 rupees 80 paise
per minute.
16 rupees 80 paise per minute, just about 10, 12, 15 years back. And none of us thought that we'll be able to afford a mobile phone and we'll be able to use one. And I remember as journalists, the first fellows to get a mobile phone in those days were these television channels, the fancy television channel. NDTV reporters had the first mobile phones, and it was such a fancy thing for all of us. And they would call up their office, and they were all over the place, and they didn't have to run to a telephone, to finding a telephone booth or telephone, and they had enough. And we would very hesitantly, after once these guys became a friend, very hesitantly would ask them, "Yaar, ek baar phone de do, my phone karke de do." One of the fellows whom I asked and who gave me the phone was, I don't know, Goswami was still in NDTV in those days as a normal food reporter. So he had given me a phone once to use to call my office. So this was a kind of just 12, 13 years back. So narratives have changed. It is not that it has not changed. It has changed. People have changed. The poorest people think differently now from what they used to think earlier. Maybe in rural areas in this country they continue to think how they thought 30 years back. But semi-rural and urban areas, things have changed dramatically. So how are we going? Whether the media has understood this change, I am not very sure. Because as she was rightly pointing out, the voters, the editors, there's a very crucial difference which has happened in the media. Now people have decided who are the target audience. We didn't have this kind of when I started my profession, there was nothing called a target audience. That word was not in usage as far as journalism was concerned. Okay? And nobody, and as a reporter, I would suggest ideas to my boss, and if the idea was a good idea, he would accept it and we would do it, and it would get published. Now the first thing the editor will ask is it something which will excite our target audience? No water in a village in Latur, how is it going to affect our target audience? I don't want, There has been a very famous interview of the owner of the biggest newspaper in the world, which is incidentally in India, Times of India. He said that I am not selling a newspaper, I am selling a product. So narratives have changed. Media approach towards all these things. So we are going through a situation where we don't know where we are headed. We don't know where we are. We are like all those blind men grouping around the elephant saying what is that? That kind of situation. There is enormous information available now. There is a huge information overflow, but whether all that information means anything to anybody, how meaningfully all this information is being transmitted, I am not very sure. I'm really stuck in a dilemma to understand what's Sorry.
So I would come in here briefly. I think this
maybe as a younger person, Subi has a better understanding than I have.
I'll just try, make an attempt. There are three things that I want to table on this one. So one, there's a clear crisis of editorial leadership in this country. Make no bones about it. Mark Talley came to Jamia, the Mass Communication Research Center, and he said in today's day and age, I would refuse to be a journalist because when the chief marketing officer wanted to enter my room, he would have to wait for 5 days. Now, it's the marketing officer that runs news organizations, where it's not just target audience, it is advertisers. Advertisers connected to the kind of stories, and therefore the kind of stories will determine your readers will determine how much money will I be able to make either for 30-second spots or 5-second spots or half page or quarter page ads. So one is been the shift in terms of how we perceive the business or the political economy of media. The second is, and it's an interesting anecdote, if you look at the Fukushima disaster, the nuclear Daiichi story, the Taiwanese animators and also the response of the country, Japan as a state has an institutional response. They have turned the entire story, entire crisis, which affected private sectors, which affected citizens' responsibility, civil society, into a kid whose stomach is upset. And that's how the entire nuclear disaster is explained. So if you have a running stomach and if you can't hold it in, that's how the nuclear plant and the rising temperature, then you drink water, then it's given medicine. So the example really so much is for also the development sector. When attention spans have sunk for readers, as a public broadcaster where a lot of state money is invested, it is also our responsibility when users and readers have choice and viewers have choice and they're looking at social media, how can we use new and innovative formats of storytelling? How can animation be used? How can humor be put to use? How do you get an AIB, a video, a stand-up comedian to start decoding complex policy issues for you? So in terms of production values, it's important that we're pitching our stories right, we're also telling our stories right. It's unfortunate that marketing jargon now gets interwoven with journalism. Second is the transformation in terms of narratives. I see this more as an elevator pitch. If you're able to visualize data, impact and policy and link up why this is important or how this is going to be a path-breaking story, either in terms of increased viewership and original story. Sadly, every story is an exclusive or breaking news story. Every channel will have 5 interviews with the same person and run it as an exclusive. But you're able to do that, tempt the editor, because there's a call that will be taken at some point in time. Either showcases as an award-winning, unique story which shows original research. And the third is, stop assuming people to be at their lowest common denominators. So Government of India gave GPS sets to fishermen because they said they can use them and not get lost at sea. What fishermen did on the coastal areas is they used those GPS navigation devices to mark spots in the sea where there was more fish available. So you empower people, you give them technology. We're a country of jugaad and innovation. And the last submission is, a DJ in Punjabi Bagh will say that the crowd in a wedding is only going to dance to certain music. And editor should be able to put their foot down, and it's a difficult choice. To say, I will not produce or I will not send 4 of my best journalists to report a wedding in South Delhi of a famous businessman, because that's not what they came here for. So as a newspaper, Hindu was the only newspaper that had a rural affairs editor. So it is also what you propagate. Journalism allows you to negotiate choices of stories based on what you are as a journalist as well. So if you don't have vested interest, if you don't have hidden agendas, and if you don't want to be on that plane with a certain dignity doing foreign travels, then you will be able to ask tough questions. You will be able to use the RTI effectively and do original stories. It cuts both ways. So for us as development sector, we need to be able to be creative about how we want to tell our stories and lure, let's say, journalists into writing on these issues. And on the other hand, even the state broadcaster will have to now, as they say, we live in modern times and interesting times, innovate in formats of storytelling.
There's one more thing. The two of the panelists were originally supposed to be here on the panel today. One is Harish Damodaran of Indian Express, and the other is Nitin, Sethi. These are two journalists who have been able to navigate through this in the same, atmosphere in which we live today, the same eco sphere which they work today. They are able to do some excellent stories. These are two journalists, in fact, I have great respect for. Nitin and Harish Damodaran has been doing excellent stories on agriculture in Indian Express, and Nitin has been doing some excellent stories on development. There's a lot of good development stories. So there are journalists who have been able to find their way through all this and are managing to find that. So in every newspaper or in every other newspaper, to find these kind of journalists who are doing some excellent stories. So to that extent, there is still hope. It's not that everything is lost. Now, I wish they were here so that we could have heard from them how difficult it is to wade through this kind of situation and still get their stories through.
Yeah.
Right. I'm afraid we've run out of time. Maybe there are more questions or if you had any comments, but I guess that can happen outside in the outside space. I'd like to thank both Girish and Subi for their very, very insightful and rather frank exposition on the interface between development media. I think they are reflections for both the media community as well as for development practitioners coming out of what has been discussed. So thank you very much for taking time out. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you everyone.